Welcome, everybody. Just like the title says, we're going to be talking about regulation. I personally believe regulation is going to be the #1 roadblock for preparedness moving forward. I know a lot of people truly believe in this apocalyptic scenario, this shit hits the fan, this raw scenario. I don't believe that. There's no empirical marker that would make me think so. So before this clip hits 30 seconds, if you can't be open-minded, just go ahead and log off. I don't want to waste your time. For those of you guys that are still here, I think it's important, and like everything I do in my channel, I think it's important that we talk about the empirical data and we go about it in a data-driven way. Now, I'm not saying don't prepare for whatever it is that you're going to prepare for, but I think it's important that we realize moving forward the actual things that we're going to be coming in contact with day to day, the actual things that, in my opinion, actually matter. And I know this isn't going to be a particularly sexy video, but the data is the data, and all I can do is follow it, and I don't really care, what other people think. But I think it's important we look at this empirically. So let's.
Judge, for a New Yorker like me, this sounds crazy. Our utilities, they're regulated, but Texans decided years ago they want to privatize the market and make decisions for themselves. And this is what you end up with.
No, Texans didn't decide that. Electric companies and the governor decided that. And they set about a scheme that benefits large commercial users with rock bottom prices.
It is awful in every way. There's this idea out there, though, that deregulation is good for people. They can choose what they want. But regulation is protection. And now Texans have been left unprotected.
That's right. You need some regulation in a commodity market like electricity. Electricity is not the place where you want to allow gambling. Now, most of these consumers didn't know they were gambling.
There's a meter here on this house, and then there's a meter actually out here.
Ty Williams and his family were among the lucky ones during this week's storm.
No, we never lost power.
But he did pay a price. It's his electric bill.
Almost $17,000.
You heard him right. $17,000.
$17,000.
3 meters, 5 days. He's a customer of a company called Griddy.
Griddy is real-time access to the power grid wholesale, which is great most of the time.
Except when it's not. This week, wholesale prices were so high they hit a state-imposed cap. And even though the Williams did what they could to conserve,
I unplugged refrigerators. I turned off everything. I turned off all the lights. We literally tried to stay in one room and use our gas heaters.
Their bill ballooned. Griddy urged their customers late last week to switch companies before the storm because of a high price forecast. Ty says he tried repeatedly and was told by many prospective providers a switch would take at least a week.
It was useless because no one wanted to take on the burden of a new client when they're paying top dollar for power.
He was finally able to switch hours before we arrived at his house.
This can't happen to people.
So let's just be honest with what we're talking about here, okay? Let's talk about the Griddy situation real quick. It's important to note a few things here, right? It's important to note something that I've been talking about repeatedly on this channel that is very unpopular. You are not owed anything just because you have the fiat currency to pay for a product or pay for a service. That's the truth, guys. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be hurtful to anybody. But when you realize that you are not owed something based upon the amount of fiat currency you have in your wallet or some numbers you have on a card, the more this is going to make sense to you, because we have to look at things in factuality. And the factuality is, right, that it's not controversial at all. You're not owed anything, okay? That's #1. #2, it's also important to note that the majority of people in the world, preppers included, most of them, do feel like it is the role of the government to protect them from themselves, okay? So it's funny how we have a society of complete cognitive dissonance, right? In one breath, you have people that believe that they should have rights and freedoms to do whatever they want. Good argument. But then on another side, they say, well, whenever I get myself in trouble, whenever I intentionally put myself in harm's way, I should have no consequences for my actions. And so when these two cross each other, we have something called public policy, right? And public policy would go into effect, which would create laws and regulations. And just like this lady attempted to say, you know, freedom isn't a good thing, right? We need regulations because people need to be protected from themselves. That's essentially what she's saying. People need to be protected from themselves. I'm not here to make that argument one way or another. Like I said, I'm just here to stick with the facts. And those are what the facts are, right? We are being told that a deregulated Texas power grid is bad because most of the time power is cheap and it's great most of the time, but that one little storm that comes ruins everything for everybody, and so therefore there needs to be regulation. That is literally the argument that is being presented here. And then you have this judge trying to piss on my foot and tell me that it's raining because he's saying that these are commodities and they shouldn't be, you know, they shouldn't be gambled with. And then in the very next, you know, slide there, I showed you that water, we know this, power, gold, oil, all these commodities are now being traded on Wall Street. So in one breath, you know, he's saying you as an individual do not have the right, you're not smart enough to make decisions based upon buying wholesale power. You're just not smart enough. You need protections. And that shouldn't be gambled with. In the very next breath, nobody's arguing that we shouldn't be able to trade municipal water on commodity on the stock market or power on the stock market. So in one breath, he wants to say it's a commodity that we shouldn't be tampered with. And then we know in total reality, he has no problem. And he's not speaking out at all against regulations that would be implemented for these commodities on Wall Street, right? So we have to realize this, right? And to me, the writing's on the wall. When people say we don't know what's going to happen next, I don't understand. I don't understand that idea. We know what's going to happen next. We see what's happening next, right? So commodities are going to be traded. This is historically what you do with commodities, right? So we're going to get off that because how somebody could say something so ridiculous on national television blows my mind. But anyway, it's his opinion. He's allowed to have it. It's her opinion. She's allowed to have it. So what you have here, for those of you that aren't 100% in the know what's going on, you have Griddy, which is a power company who provides wholesale prices on electricity. And normally, 99.9% of the time, the prices are very, very, very low. For example, you know, the average home in Texas in the wintertime when they're buying wholesale power can literally buy power, you know, to heat a home for, you know, power usage probably be around $50 a month versus $200 a month if you were, you know, grid tied to a meter that just did, you know, flat rate. Okay. And so, I mean, I've seen, according to what they're showing, prices as cheap as, you know, $3 or 3 cents a kilowatt hour, just things like that. Right. And so when you buy wholesale, you get wholesale prices. But with that being said, when prices go up, whether that is they're artificially inflated by, for example, you know, if they're being traded on Wall Street, a GameStop type situation, or a storm or natural disaster, there are different ways that commodities can go up. Crazy. So when commodities go up, if you're buying at wholesale prices, price goes up, right? Also, on the same breath, if you are already at a flat rate, you pay that flat rate no matter what the price does, right? So goes without saying. Texas, I think, is probably one of the only states that has that. I know my state doesn't have that, or else I would jump on it in a heartbeat. But that's what you have, right? And so you have a power company that's selling people, happy people, for the most part until the storm hit, with wholesale pricing, which they had no problem with. Then we saw that, just like was that gentleman said, Griddy said, hey, you need to switch power. You need to switch power services, power providers. And let's not take just his word for it. Let me go ahead and show you the screenshots from the company itself. So there you have it. You see a company that's literally telling people, we don't want your money. You need to go with a different provider who's going to be able to give you a flat rate to weather the storm. And then if you guys want to come back, you absolutely can. So we see the free market doing everything perfectly that the free market should be doing, right? We see the fact that, the governor of Texas artificially inflated the prices of electricity. You saw the wholesaler is doing everything it can for his customers. And what you then see is, and from what you watch all the interviews, you see people who are unwilling or unable to take fiscal responsibility for their actions, to take extreme ownership for what's going on, right? And so what happens? Regulation. People need to be protected from themselves, right? And why does this matter from a preparedness aspect? I'm not saying one is good or another, but what I'm saying is when these regulations go into effect, they are going to limit your ability to be as prepared as possible, whether that's taking more money from you. Because now if we have a regulated grid like we have here in my state, I pay a fixed rate, and that fixed rate is slowly and surely will continue to go up, right? So let's take a look at this from a common sense standpoint. Let's say I was in Texas and I had to choose, right? This is the situation that I would find myself in. Gritty says, hey, by the way, you need to change service providers because we're projecting with this ice storm, prices are going to go through the roof. Thanks so much, Gritty. I appreciate it. I'm going to call another power company. Hey, I'm looking to switch power companies. Will you be willing to take me on as a customer? Sure, absolutely, but it's going to take a week, or it's going to take until after the storm hits before we can switch you over. Perfect. Go ahead and set that appointment. I'm going to go over to Gritty. Hey, thank you for your time. Thank you for your services. Go ahead and shut my power off and send me the final bill as of right now this second. Are you sure? Absolutely. Are you sure, unapologetic prepper? I'm 100% sure. Go ahead and shut me off and send me the bill so I can pay it in full. Then I would shut my electricity off. I would pay in full. And as somebody who takes extreme ownership for the human condition of themselves and their families, we would do like we normally do every single time there's a power outage out here, because there's power outages all the time, right? Because I'm prepared. And it would be so much easier to be even more prepared if I was paying a third or fourth the price most of the year for my power. I could put that money to more preparations, right? To make myself sure that I'm okay. Because a week, 2 weeks without power, easy. In the snow, easy. I'll stay warm. I'll take a hot shower every single day. No problem, right? And so that's what I would do, right? But you have people that they can't do that. They didn't bother being prepared. They didn't bother taking the necessary steps. And we know that's going to happen. So put that to the side. How does it affect public policy now? Well, that same public policy that would input those regulations, such as, caps and stuff like that. So let's say you are spending, so many cents a kilowatt hour, and now you're at a fixed rate, right? Well, let's say that your normal bill is $50 a month on wholesale power. Well, on the fixed rate, let's say you're paying $200, right? Because most of the time, and why people were on Gritty and wholesale prices, their price for the fixed rate was 3 to 4 times what they would be spending on a wholesaler. So why wouldn't you do that, right? Obviously, there's risk involved if there's, that 0.1% of something happening, and that could happen. And so what you see here is you see power companies that are now able to give you power 300 times what, or 400 times what they can actually get it wholesale for. So majority of the time you're getting screwed because they're hitting you at that fixed rate, but it's fixed, right? So, for 1 week out of the year, maybe there's something going on where they have to pay higher prices, but the rest of the year, no worries. And even with that, right, with the rolling blackouts, doesn't guarantee you that you're going to have power even at that fix. So how does this affect us from a preparedness standpoint? Well, a couple things, right? So you're going to have fixed caps. So meaning more money is taken out of your wallet because, you can't be entrusted to pay your own power bill without having regulations in place. You're not responsible. You're not smart enough to make that decision for yourself. That's number one. Number two, these are the same regulators that would prevent you from putting solar on your roof, that would prevent you from putting other renewables on your roof and connecting to the grid. that would be the same. Those would be the same entities, because when it's government run, when there's a monopoly, when there's these regulations, you can't take responsibility for your actions. You are not allowed to put solar on your roof. You cannot grid tie your solar into the power grid. Yeah, we know it's your house. Yeah, we know you're creating your own power, but you have to buy it from us, and that's it, right? You don't own what you think you own. So that causes your preparedness to go down significantly, right? Even if you wanted to do something like that, you couldn't. The only way to make that work is by, doing some high-end hybrid type system that, is low key and nobody knows you have it. So when the power grid goes off, boom, you can switch over. And a lot of places, that's highly illegal. Something to think about, something to keep in the back of your mind. So as we saw with this Texas power regulation, we see a couple things. And I'm just going to hit on them real quick before we move on to our next topics of discussion here. First thing it's important to note, right? You as a law-abiding, freedom-loving person, you are not smart enough to make decisions for yourself. That's just what it comes down to. You're not smart enough to buy power wholesale. You are not smart enough. Number two, public policy meets public interest. And that literally means you should not be held responsible for your actions because, again, you're not smart enough to make them. So it's the government's job to come in and take care of you. You should not be held responsible for your actions. So with that being said, there's going to be rules and regulations that are going to be implemented that would prevent you from taking responsibility for your actions, right? And in this one instance, we see that from a power standpoint. And while all that's being said, they're going to make it under the interest of public safety. That's why we have this public policy. We want to protect you. We want to protect you from those mean oil companies and those mean electric companies. What they're really saying is we need to protect you from yourself. That's what they're really saying. You're not smart enough. We need to protect you from yourself. And there's enough people upset right now because they're getting fitted with the big bill that you should just toe the line. Okay. So that's what we got from the power standpoint, and all this to say, they're saying all this stuff and they're saying that we shouldn't be gambling with commodities. And then I just showed you numerous sources and numerous headlines that show you that they're trading water, electricity. They're literally trading municipal water and electricity on the stock market because those are commodities. The judge is 110% right. Those are commodities that shouldn't be gambled with unless you're gambling on Wall Street. Let's take a look at something else. So coming to you from the great state of Oregon, or Oregon. I don't know. They both sound weird. From the great state of Oregon, there is now legislation that would make meth, heroin, crack cocaine, coke, just all these different Schedule 1 narcotics or drugs decriminalized, essentially legal. So from what I'm gathering and what I've been told from people in the know over there, possession of, for example, meth, as long as you have under 2 grams of it, which how can you test? Because cops in Oregon can't test roadside anyway, because it's all the fentanyl concerns. It's, straight down from the governor. You shall not test. You shall not nix text drugs roadside. So, is what it is. But anyway, if you have 2 grams or less of methamphetamines, PCS meth, essentially, you get in trouble. The officer can write you a D violation. Not a misdemeanor, a D violation. That is the lowest violation that you can write somebody. Like literally the lowest. You get in more trouble for speeding. Speeding is a bigger crime. Open container of alcoholic beverage is a bigger crime. You going to a local homestead or farm and buying agricultural products like turkey meat or chicken meat or dairy is of a higher criminality. Isn't that crazy? And obviously, we're being told that this is a public safety issue. The reason why we need to, the reason why Oregon needs to decriminalize, drugs is because it's for your safety. But you choosing to go to a farm or homestead and buying dairy, you're not allowed to do that. That's not for your safety. It's okay for them to have drugs and put meth in their body, but it's not okay for you to put dairy in your body because hashtag veganism, right? And so it's a very interesting dynamic that we find ourselves in, because this is the reality of the world that we live in, right? And, you know, I was looking more at Oregon case law. There's even case law in Oregon where a state trooper, you know, at the, I believe it's U of O in Eugene, I don't know, but Eugene, somewhere in Eugene at a college, I believe this University of Oregon, stopped a female lady. She was riding a bike on the opposite incoming lane of traffic. So he performed a traffic stop, right? I mean, that technically is traffic. He stopped her and asked for her ID. She said no. He asked repeatedly no. So he took her. He's like, you're under arrest. You know, I guess, you know, traffic stop, failure to carry, present, or whatever. Anyway, so he arrested her, which he's legally allowed to do. But the district attorney for Eugene, County of Eugene, said, we're not going to file because the criminality is so low. It's a violation. It's so low that the use of force, we can't justify using force on it. So essentially, the precedent that set is for violations, you know, if you just don't want to give your, you know, if you don't want to give your ID to the cop, you very well may not have to, you know. Certain agencies may have Lexapol policies that would state, you know, if it's just for a violation and they're not being cooperative, you just let it go because it's not worth the hassle in court. And so if you think about it, possession of narcotics in Oregon is at the lowest violation, D-violation. So realistically, if somebody's, you know, in a public park smoking a meth pipe, you know, smoking meth out of a meth pipe, officer makes contact. If that drug user, let's call him what he is, decides that he doesn't want to cooperate, the officer may not have the resources and tools and backing to even get the person's identification. But if that same police officer finds that you are in possession of water inaccuracy, which is an aquatic plant that is really good at oxygenating, you know, a lot of people use them in aquaponic systems, and, you know, different aquarium hobbyists swear by water inaccuracy, you can go to jail because it is actually illegal to have water inaccuracy in Oregon. In fact, it's also illegal to have certain kinds of bushes. Let's take a look at that. So there you have it. I'm not trying to be a dead horse here, but what I'm trying to say is when personal responsibility meets personal interest, public policy, right? When people refuse, and majority of people, they refuse to take responsibility for their actions, right? So like we saw in Texas, people are more than willing to spend less money on power until it costs them money. Until it hurts. Even when they are warned, foretold, encouraged, motivated, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you try to lead them, right? You can lead them to success. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As soon as there is any kind of harsh reality placed upon them from their own doing, they need protection from themselves. And that's where we get public policy. And that's going to continue to happen, right? And I'm not here to say public policy is good or bad. That is not the purpose of this video. I'm not here to make that claim, because obviously the majority of people in the world would say that it's good, right? So I'm not here to make that argument. What I am here to say, though, is these regulations would make it harder for people who want to be able to take personal responsibility for their actions, right? If you want the freedom to go to a local homestead or dairy or farm and buy dairy products, you're not allowed to do that. You can, but it's super illegal, and there are teeth to imprison you. But if you were to go, say, smoke meth with your friend at the park, and he gives you meth to smoke, that's if you're in Oregon, I mean, what's going to happen, right? But if I were to go to a local homestead or dairy, like I said before, and, sample their cheese, even without paying any prices on anything, there's some criminality there. So it's important to realize, and it's important to know, and it's important to understand where we find ourselves, okay? And so, yes, Please go ahead, prepare for the Mad Max situations that aren't going to come to fruition. That's fine. Prepare for those. But just realize every day in your day-to-day life, the things that are going to make it harder for you to be prepared is going to be regulation, right? If you can buy 5,000 watts of solar, but you're not allowed to install it on your roof, where are you going to install it? What are you going to do with it? Is the idea that you're just going to buy tons of battery backup and pay for an expensive hybrid system or something like that? Is that the idea? Okay, maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe, you live in a state where, you can be in possession of methamphetamines, but you can't be in possession of a rain catchment system, right? Maybe you are in a state where you can have possession of heroin and crack cocaine up to 2 grams, but you can't have, certain seeds, or seed banks are illegal in your state, right? So these are all different things that are going to matter day to day, right? They're going to matter. And as more regulations come into play, you can see more and more of this happening. And especially in the day of COVID, where you even have, certain restrictions when it comes to your ability to move and your ability to be around other people. Pay attention. That's all I have for you guys. If you guys totally disagree with me, please leave me a thumbs down and then tell me why I was wrong. I'm really curious to see what you guys have going on in your area. What are you guys seeing? What freedoms are you seeing that you don't have the ability to do anymore, right? What legislation, what regulations are in your area that just seem asinine? Really curious to know. Really curious to get your guys' opinions and viewpoints on it. Well, I hope you guys like the video. And as always, guys, long live the Republic.